welcome to the Art of Being Human. We've been talking about childhood development, and so the growth that occurs in a child from age of 2.5, the preschool period, to about age 6, there's a tremendous amount of growth. And at age 5, a child can exchange information and talk with people. They get mixed up, of course, but that's all right. That's a part of that development too. And they have different kinds of play. I just want to review with you, and then the types of play that an early child has. And then I'm going to go into some quotes of children, because they are pretty funny, some of them, and trying to explain themselves and trying to understand things and trying to figure out who they are in the world. They are trying to find their place in the world. So let's get to the types of play. I've already discussed with you parallel play, where a child plays beside somebody but not really with somebody. And then after that, when they develop a little more, they have interactive play where they actually play, and there's an interchange between the children, or they play in groups and they're all doing something, playing some kind of a game. That's a really important step in development, though, because now they're able to interchange with other children. They do have solitary play where they want to play alone, dramatic play. Now, dramatic play is where they pretend to be like their parents. The mother's on the phone, so the child grabs a toy phone and kind of blabbers into it, that kind of thing. They're really practicing the skills that they're going to need as they grow up, and they're practicing the skills that they're going to have as adults in dramatic play. It's not something that's really bombastic, but there it is. You can see. I was in a doctor's office, and I was watching two children play. And there's a child that was so careful. He was doing the blocks. He was doing everything just right. And another child, I don't know if he was in the same family or not, came over and knocked it all down. And the little boy who had the blocks knocked down tried to negotiate with this other child. He wasn't very old, so he must have been fairly bright. And he would say things, well, how would you feel if I knocked down your blocks? If you spent all this time creating something, although he didn't use the word create, but building something, and then somebody knocks it down, wouldn't that make you upset? Wouldn't you want to cry? Wouldn't you want to do something? And the other boy could care less. And he just sat down, and the little boy built the blocks back up again. He's making a tower or something, and the other little boy comes and knocks it down again, and that repeated itself. I waited for quite a while for my appointment, and I watched this, and it went on and on and on. Now, if I'd been a parent, I would have stopped it. I would have stopped the other boy from kicking down the other child's blocks. But the thing is, the differences in personality, they show up early. One is going to be a negotiator and try to figure things out. The other's just going to want to go his own way. And if he sees something he doesn't like, knock it over, change it, do something. So you see the differences in personality. So you have dramatic play and play in groups. There are different types of play, and they will show you what the development of a child is, because they can only play in such a way that their brain allows them to do. Now, I want to read you some quotes. These are 4-year-olds, 3 years old, 5-year-old, in that age range. And here's a little boy who is inspecting his stomach as he dresses after a nap. Now, you got to remember, these kids are about the same age, and they're trying to figure out things about themselves. But the quotes are very interesting and shows what they're struggling with and what they're trying to learn. This little boy is 4. He says, you know a thing? There's something funny about my skin. It fits all smooth mostly, but when I do this, there are extra skin in crumples. In other words, he's pulling on it. What is that for? It's loose so you can move and stretch. No, it's not loose, or it would show. It would hang down. It would be too big, like a rubber band. Would it break if you pulled it too much? Can I stretch my skin a lot? I had the same skin when I was a baby. It fits very nice. It is me. So he's trying to figure out, well, if I pull on my skin, is it going to break? Why is it my skin fits me if I was a child, a young child, and I had skin and it's the same skin, but it still fits me even though I'm bigger? How come? You see, all of these, we never stop to think of that these are things that little kids think of. Sometimes I wonder about the blood in me. It's all wet and blood and moving and lots of insides, but all the outside is dry and careful. And you would never know about the inside part by looking at the outside part. Now, I read part of this last session, but I'm going to continue with it. Not unless you got a hole in you and some of the blood came out. All the people are like that. Their skins keep them in, but underneath their skins is such a lot. Your insides never stop. Everybody is like that. I am. Did you ever think about it? A picture that would be for you would be for me too. Then we are alike. You and me are alike. And he's trying to figure out individual differences. I have an inside, you have an inside. So therefore we are alike because we both have an inside and we both have an outside too. So these children are trying to figure out their place in society. Now here's one about a dentist. Once there was Stuart with a tooth, and in it there was a hole. So it was fixed. The man had many little streams there, very nice. There was a pane, a bright pane. It was bright when he pushed with a noise and a bar. He's trying to explain a dental procedure that was done on him. So he continues. This is part of the same quote. But there was no blood, no blood. Can I get a hole in my hand like the hole in my tooth? Will it have to be filled with a loud noise? It bled and bled and she died. He's talking about a story he was reading. I was reading a story and the blood and the story, a girl had something snap off her nose and it bled and she died. I have my tonsils out. What will happen when I have my tonsils out? Will it bleed? Will I be dead? Being blood is being dead. Why do I have my tonsils out? I do not like myself, not to be myself, and that is what will happen, even if the littlest tonsils is taken away from me. Sad it is to have a nose taken off, so it will be sad to have a tonsils out. Blood, 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 when the nose and the tonsil is out. You know what he's saying? He read a book, and in this fiction book, a girl had her nose taken off and it bled. Well, he's going to have his tonsils out, or he thinks he's going to have his tonsils out, and he's afraid it's going to bleed. And if it bleeds, is he going to die? That's what he's worried about. He's going to die because he's not going to be him. Or if he has a tooth pulled, it's not going to be like him. He's going to be different if anything is taken out of him, and he's not sure that that's going to be a good thing. So he's trying to figure all kinds of scenarios as to what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens. Am I going to be myself? If I have to have surgery, and he wouldn't express it this way, of course, he wouldn't have the verbal skills, but if I have to have surgery and something is taken out of me, does that change me so I'm not myself anymore? Now, you see, I think when we're raising children, we have to be aware of what their fears are, and we have to be very encouraging of them to talk about these fears to us. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid? What bothers you? How can we help you over this? You know, because they will be afraid. I remember when I had my tonsils out, it was the ether that was it smelled so bad, I was screaming until finally I passed out with the anesthesia. And then after that, I had my appendix out. And I was afraid because I didn't want the ether again because it smells so bad. And here again, I would just scream because it smelled so bad I couldn't take it. But they kept the nose cone on, and I finally just fell asleep. But what does that do later on? It means later on you might develop the kind of PTSD. I'm not saying I ever did, but it would be possible to do that. Anything that's so stressful for you as a child can affect you to the point where you have PTSD. So we need to keep our minds open to what a child is grappling with. This little boy is saying, I'm afraid to have something taken off from me because then I won't be me anymore. And what they need to do is to have the comfort of a parent who says you will be you. That's not going to change you and you're going to be okay. Just to hear those words from the parent and the parent is close by taking care of him, that'll help him to get over that. Let's see, here's another one. A voice is a fast thing, isn't it? It's a sound. Are other sounds voices of things? Is the day got a voice, a sound? Where is your voice? It comes out of your mouth. Is it in your mouth? Are all the words stored up someplace in your mouth? How can you get food in if all those words are in your mouth? How much space does a word take? Words are thin little things, but some of them make a big noise. A sound, it is bigger than a word. So here again, he's thinking, I speak words, but where do they come from? They come from my throat, but do they take up any space? Because if words take up space, there won't be any space left for me to have a drink or eat some food. Now, how would a child know? I mean, this is just natural to a child to think like this. How would they know any different? We might say, oh, that's a funny saying, because you create, your voice creates the words, but it doesn't take up space. But how is a child to understand that? You stop to think, a child has no experience in life except for his parents' care as he's growing up, and he's just beginning to search out what other people are like, and he's just beginning to understand that he is a person in his own right. And so now he's got all kinds of questions. Now I can talk, but where are the words coming from, and do they take up space? Someone would need to tell him words really don't take up space, even if it's a big word. And even if a word is big and makes a noise, I don't know how he thinks about words making a big noise, but maybe a person yelling or something like that. So he needs to know a little bit about enough not to be afraid of it. So he isn't afraid to talk, and he isn't afraid to make noise, and he's not afraid of life because it's okay to talk. You're not going to lose your ability to swallow and have food if you talk. But why would a child even understand it? So I think what to us is so natural, and we don't even give it a thought, a child has to think about and try and figure it out. Because to him, it doesn't quite make sense yet. Because he hasn't lived long enough for it to make sense, and his brain hasn't developed enough for it to make sense. So we need to be sensitive to that, and we need to understand what they're saying and why they're saying it, and give them the comfort and the knowledge that they need. Now, here's a sore throat. Did you ever have a red pain in your throat? It's interesting that he considers a pain to be red, but that he does. The pain, it was there. I could not see it, but it was there. It is funny. I could not see it. It is funny. It is my pain in my throat. Why could I not see it? I could feel it. It is my pain. So here he's still trying to search out who he is and what is this thing called pain. If I can feel pain, why can't I see it? You know, there's the little boy who says you have insides, but you never know it unless some of the blood comes out. There's a lot of truth in some of these things that children are saying, and they're trying to figure it out. Why can't I see pain? I can feel pain, but I can't see it. What is life that you can feel something that you can't see? It's interesting to think of what these children actually go through. Most of the play actually comes from fantasy because a very young child, does not know the difference between what's real and what's not real. To them, if they're sitting in front of a television set and they're watching, say, a program like Lassie with a dog in it, they think the dog is inside the television set. They think that the people on TV are actually inside the set because they cannot tell the difference between what's real and not real. I know people like that, some people who are retarded like that. They watch shows on television, and they don't realize it's an act and it's a story. They think it's the real thing. Then they get mad at a character, and they'll start screaming at the character because they think that character is real, and they just can't tell the difference, and they really can't. Your brain has to be pretty well developed. I know when my father died, he had grandchildren. I had nieces and nephews, and they thought that they could go up to heaven with a balloon and bring him back down. They actually thought they could do that. They were like 3 and 4 years old. So you have to understand that children at that age cannot tell reality from something that's fantasy. They just cannot tell the difference. So that's important. Now, at this time, 4 or 5 years old, children will start developing imaginary friends. They will create a friend in their mind, and as far as they're concerned, the friend is real. 50% of children create imaginary friends, and they get some emotional help from them, because if they need a friend or they need someone that's understanding, they simply create them in their own mind. So it's a little bit helpful. But sometimes it can be unfriendly, too. It depends upon if the child feels guilty, then that imaginary friend may be accusing them. But if that's not the case, most of it turns out to be friendly. Sometimes a child will insist that you set the table so that they can eat at the table, even though they're not really there. Children will create imaginary friends up until about age 10, but I hate to put a limit on it, but usually it stops at about age 10. And they feel that adults know everything that they're thinking, so it's like they think that the adults know everything. And that may lead to some fears. Now, I want to read something. I have the time for this. I'll probably close with it. There's a child who is deaf, partially deaf, and she created an imaginary friend to help her, and that imaginary friend's name was Wrinkle. So let me read to you about Wrinkle. Wrinkle was a private spokesman for the resentments of a well-behaved, hard-of-hearing girl who was afraid to acknowledge her handicap and therefore could not ask people to speak up. Wrinkle came along at this time. This is a child quoting this. I wanted a close friend. Also in my world of aunts and sisters, a boy was interesting. Wrinkle was invisible and inaudible, which left him free to do and say whatever he wanted. The first time he entered a room, he found the exact center of the ceiling and drove in a large invisible staple. He tossed in the pictures and curtain rods and poles. It went through everything, and chandeliers, and it climbed over people's heads. He could listen to any of their talk, and he could make nonsense out of it. Wrinkle was smarter than anybody, smarter than my sister Ann. For one thing, he was a boy. For another thing, though he could hear as perfectly as Ann could, he didn't care whether he heard perfectly or not. He chose to hear and to act on what he heard strictly as he had a mind to. When people talked and Wrinkle didn't make sense of what they said, that wasn't because he didn't hear it. It was because he liked to make nonsense by weaving his own name in and out of their sentences. He killed people off for me all the time. He killed off all the ones I didn't like, the ones who cleared their throats pointedly or raised their voices at me as if they thought I might not hear them. He killed off deadpans when they mumbled some question at me. So you see, she is having a lot of difficulty. She can't hear well. She creates this invisible friend whose name is Wrinkle, and Wrinkle can hear but chooses not to. Wrinkle may not hear everything, but he doesn't care. He is, in a sense, carrying the burden of her deafness because she feels bad about it. She feels people are making fun of her because of it, and she's angry about it, and she doesn't know what to do. So what Wrinkle does is do all the things she wished that she could do, but she can't do. Kill off the people that make fun of her because of her deafness. You know, it's just this character, Wrinkle, satisfied her need to have some understanding creation take care of her and be her kind of advocate as she was struggling with the deafness. Now, what a parent should do if the child was deaf, make sure they get the care that they need, make sure they get the hearing aids or whatever they need, and then search out, how does this child feel? Is this child embarrassed about being deaf? Is this child angry about being deaf? Are people making fun? Are people bullying? You know, and then deal with that. So this child does not have to deal with life alone with an imaginary friend. And what does she do? She turns her anger into Wrinkle, who can kill off anyone that upsets her because she's deaf. So you can see the complications that develop in a child's life that the parent may not even know about because they don't stop to ask or they don't stop to talk to the child and find out what's really going on in their mind. And a lot of children do develop these characters, these little people in their mind, these imaginary friends to help them out. And this is the function of them, to help them out. Now, how long does it last? Well, as long as the child feels the need for it. If the child feels the need to have a friend, the friend will be there as long as they have a need. And it does satisfy some of their longings and some of their needs, but I would want a parent to know the child was working with this, the child had an imaginary friend, and try to step in the places where the child feels they need to have that imaginary friend, so that would be less necessary for them to have that friend, so that they can live a normal life without having to create people. But it's not necessarily a bad thing that a child has it. I wouldn't say you have to try to stop it, but you have to fill in the needs where the child needs to have you step in, so it becomes less necessary that this imaginary friend continues. It can kind of die off, maybe. So I guess I'm going to close it here, and we're going to be doing something else next time. Please join me then.